Alberta, Canada is awash in oil, but the U.S. will not see a drop if some American special interest groups get their way. I'm Alan Barton. Stand by for a special Facebook edition of Front Page. Joining me from New York is Vivian Krause, a Canadian writer and researcher who has investigated the oil sands issue. Vivian, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me on the show. It's great to be here.
Why don't we cover some background first? The province of Alberta has an estimated 170 billion, with a B, barrels of proven oil reserves, ranking at third in the world behind Saudi Arabia and Venezuela. But the oil is in the form of tar sands. Why don't you talk a little bit about that and how we get oil out of there?
It's quite a process. It's a complicated technical process. But over the last few years, there's been a lot of environmental improvements in the way it's done, and it's carefully regulated, and the Government of Canada and the Government of Alberta is continuing to improve the environmental performance of the industry, to the point that actually the environmental impacts have been greatly decreased and are continuing to be improved all the time.
The Trent Sanda company applied to build a pipeline from Alberta 2,000 miles to Texas, where, of course, the oil would be refined. The project would create 100,000 jobs, but shockingly enough, the Obama administration is sitting on the application. Why is that?
Well, actually, there already is a pipeline called the Keystone Pipeline that's bringing oil from the heart of Alberta into the United States. But the project would be to expand that, and it would actually double the amount of oil that America is able to buy from Canada as opposed to other countries. Now, environmental groups heavily funded by a small handful of American charitable foundations are opposed to this project, largely on the grounds of alleged environmental impacts. And they're right. There are environmental impacts associated with the extraction of oil from the oil sands. The main issues are the land use, the water use, the tailing ponds, and of course, the greenhouse gas emissions. But the problem is that on each one of those issues, the information that we're getting from environmentalists is sometimes it's a half-truth or it's misleading, and in some cases it's just plain false. I'll give you an example. The environmentalists often say that the area that is covered by the oil sands is the size of Florida. Well, they're right, but the part that's being exploited to extract the oil is only 1% of that. So there's actually 380,000 hectares of boreal forest in Alberta where oil sands are found, but the part that's being extracted is only 620 of those 380,000 acres. So it's not the size of Florida, it's an area the size of the Kennedy Space Center. So that's just one example of how it's important that we have accurate information about what's really going on, especially with an industry as important as oil and with such a highly contentious issue.
You've uncovered basically a flood of American money sort of secretly running a war against the concept of getting more Canadian oil shipped down here. Who is providing a lot of that money?
Well, that's what's so surprising. You know, American charity is so important in the world today. American charitable foundations have over $500 billion in assets, and with that kind of money, you really can change the world. But it's important that that money is well spent. And what's surprising is to find out how much money American foundations are actually pouring into Canada, of all places. I've traced more than $300 million over the last 10 years that has gone from a handful of American foundations into Canadian environmental groups. It used to be it was $20 million a year. Now it's up to about $50 million a year. So American charitable foundations are on track to spend $500 million in, of all places, Canada over the next 10 years. Having worked with the United Nations, with the UNICEF in Guatemala and Indonesia for many years, I've seen all over the world how there are many countries that are far more needy than Canada, and places where, frankly, this money could be better spent.
Greenpeace activists from Canada, U.S., and France have been staging protests against the Alberta oil sands development. Are these protests being funded by foundation money from Greenpeace, or is it, where else is it coming from?
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned Greenpeace. The David and Lucille Packard Foundation is paying Greenpeace $300,000 a year to lead a North American retailer campaign. Now, I've tried to ask which campaign that is. Is that the campaign in favor of Alaskan salmon over imported farmed salmon, or is that a campaign against a retailer, for perhaps a gas station chain? I don't know. But Greenpeace is being paid about $300,000 per year to run a retailer campaign. And I guess the thing that's fair to ask, I believe, anyways, for this to be disclosed, you know, which campaign is actually being funded. Greenpeace was also, actually Tides Canada was funded by the Rockefeller Brothers Fund to produce a website that makes a mockery of Alberta tourism. And now, I think, you know, activism is important. We need activists to keep government and industry on their toes. But the thing that bothers me about this campaign is how unfair it is to attack the tourism industry for a beef that American foundations have against the oil companies, most of which are American. So, and not only that, this website and this campaign, which is funded by the Rockefeller Brothers Fund to the tune of over $1 million, it comes out in the name of Greenpeace. The logos of the Rockefeller Brothers and Tides Canada are nowhere to be seen. It's Greenpeace's name that's on this campaign. So I think it's the disclosure issue that's really key here. I think Canadians would be surprised, to say the least, to find out how many tens of millions and hundreds of millions of the last decade of American money has come into our country. Well,
that sort of goes to my final question to you, which is how these revelations about American foundations financing anti-oil development, how has this been received in Canada? Is it known that this is happening in terms of being the funding from America? And if it is, how's it being received?
No, it's not known. I mean, I stumbled across this by accident. I'm a board member of a small nonprofit, and I was actually looking for funding for our nonprofit. We try to find parents for children, Canadian children who need to be adopted, and I was so surprised when I came across this. I thought, gee, you know, wanted to know more about what was going on. So Canadians are just starting to wake up to this, and you know, that's why I've tried to piece together really where the money is coming from. One particular organization, Tides Canada, which is sort of the counterpart of the American Tides Foundation, has accumulated $100 million in assets over the years. Not just Tides Canada alone, but also the Coast Conservation Endowment Fund Foundation, which Tides Canada has set up to funnel American money straight to a small number of First Nations on the north coast of British Columbia. And some of the projects that the Tides Foundation has funded are really puzzling. You know, that purchase of a $2 million 140 parcel of land on Cortes Island, of all places, right next to the property owned by the Mayor of Vancouver. It's that kind of thing that we wonder, well, why in Canada? I mean, you know, especially now, so many people are having a hard time in the United States, and other countries around the world are far more needy than Canada. So we have some questions about some of the ways that American money is being spent in Canada in the name of charity.
All right, thank you, Vivian Krause. Very interesting. You can find more of Vivian's commentary on her website at fair-questions.com. And viewers, help your friends get the right media in their social media. Make sure you let them know about Front Page. We have all the analysis you need of events in the news every Friday and Saturday. For Vivian Krause, I'm Alan Barton. Thanks for watching.